That was discovered years later. When DDT was first applied, the discoverer, Paul Mueller, won a Nobel Prize. And only years later did we learn about a phenomenon called biomagnification of the food chain. When CFCs began to be used in the millions of pounds in refrigerants and in spray cans, we had no idea there would be an impact on the ozone layer. And as we approach new fields of genetic engineering, robots, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, space travel, and geoengineering, what more are we going to find out that we didn't know? How do we guide ourselves into an uncertain and uncharted future? By the Bible? A lot of people do. By the Quran? How about the Wall Street Journal? Or maybe Ayn Rand? Or how about Donald Trump? They're all telling us what we ought to be doing. Science is not all-knowing, but I believe it's the best we have, even with its limitations, in describing the state of the world and our effect on it. Think of humanity the way I do, in terms of evolution. When we appeared as a species 150 to 200,000 years ago, we weren't very impressive. Our birthplace was Africa, and you started to think about the abundance and diversity of animals that must have existed back then. We were very unimpressive. There weren't many of us. We weren't big. We weren't fast. We weren't strong. We didn't have special senses. I'm sure that no other species, when we walked by, went, shh, don't piss him off. They're going to take over the planet. I mean, what did we have? We were just this two-legged, furless ape. Well, of course, the secret of our success was that 1.5 kilogram organ buried deep in our skulls. It was the human brain that conferred a massive memory. No other mammal has a memory of a human brain. We were curious. We were acutely observational. And we were creative. And those qualities more than compensated for our lack of physical and sensory abilities. And that brain invented an idea no other creature has. It's called the future. We realized that we could affect that future by what we do in the present. Based on our knowledge and experience, and it was simple, in the beginning you're walking down a path, it branches into, well, I went down right a few months ago and I ran into a saber-toothed tiger. But when I went down to the left a year ago, I found something good to smoke. Eat. And so we do choose deliberately to go down to the left. That was what we did based on what we knew. We looked ahead. We could see where there was possible danger, where there were opportunities, and we chose to avoid the danger and exploit opportunities. Foresight, I believe, was our great evolutionary advantage. And it was a key part of our success as a species. Over tens of thousands of years, as we moved across entire planets and oceans, we learned in new places. We were an invasive species wherever we went. We learned through the mistakes and failures and successes of our ancestors, and we remembered that in different places. We accumulated that knowledge. Hard-won life experience that became indigenous knowledge of people all over the planet. For 99% of our existence, we were nomadic hunter-gatherers and then farmers. We always knew then that weather, climate, the seasons, pollination, nitrogen fixation were critical for our well-being and survival. In other words, we knew that we lived in an ecocentric world, a world in which we were a part of a complex mesh of other species and of air and water and land, all of that we call nature. In an ecocentric worldview, we know that we're intimately embedded and dependent on that mesh of life. But very recently, we've begun to think that we're above nature. We are in control. And this has become what we call an anthropocentric way of seeing the world. We think that we're at the center and everything is about and for us. Like our distant ancestors, scientists today are armed with supercomputers who look ahead and see where opportunities and dangers lie. And for over 50 years, leading scientists of the world have been telling us we're moving along a very dangerous path, and that to avoid disaster, we have to change direction and make the protection of nature and sustainability the driving forces of all of our actions. But now, we have created the way we see the world. We're at the center, and we are turning our backs on the very ability of looking ahead that got us to where we are today. The legal system that we've created defines property and rights. We define all of those things. But where is the right of a river to run free? Where is the right of a whale or a walrus to live out its life? Where is the right of a forest to flourish and support a community of other organisms? Who the hell do we think we are that we're going to make and define the rights as if that is our world to do so? We've invented an economic system that is based on human productivity and creativity. But nature's services, the things that nature does that keeps a planet habitable for an animal like us, as the elder says, taking carbon out of the air and putting oxygen back in it. Not a bad service for us to enjoy. It's nature that filters the water as it percolates through the soil. Nature creates the soil. Every bit of our food was once alive, and yet these services that we benefit from, economists disregard or ignore as an externality. Because our economy, this human construct, is based on the creed of cancer. Growth forever. That's the driving force of our economic system. How can that possibly happen in a finite world? But because growth has become the defining, the definition of progress, we don't ask the important questions. What's an economy for? Are there no limits? How much is enough? Are we happier with all this stuff? We don't ask the critical questions. And our political system only looks from one election to the next. Children don't vote. Future generations don't exist. They're not on the political agenda because political vision only extends from one election to the next. And when we define ministers of forests, ministers of fisheries and oceans, ministers of the environment, do you think their job is to protect forests, to protect fish, to protect the oceans or the environment? No. They're there to protect the ability of humans to exploit these resources. So the game is rigged. In an anthropocentric world where everything is about us, we think that we're going to set the rules, and the rules rule against the very things that keep us alive. We, as I say, we are turning our backs on the long-held ability to look ahead and take action to avoid danger. In 1992, a remarkable document was released called World Scientists' Warning to Humanity. And this was signed by more than 1,700 senior scientists from 71 countries, including more than half of all Nobel Prize winners alive at that time. And here's how their document started. Human beings in the natural world are on a collision course. Human activities inflict harsh and often irreversible damage on the environment and on critical resources. If not checked, many of our current practices put at serious risk the future we wish for human society and the plant and animal kingdoms, and may so alter the living world that it will be unable to sustain life in the manner that we know. Fundamental changes are urgent if we are to avoid the collision our present course will bring about. And then the document goes on to list the areas of collision: the atmosphere, water resources, oceans, soil, forests, species extinction, and overpopulation. And then the words grow even more alarming. No more than one or a few decades remain, and this came out in 1992. No more than one or a few decades remain before the chance to avert the threats we now confront will be lost, and the prospects for humanity immeasurably diminished. A great change in our stewardship of the earth and life on it is required if vast human misery is to be avoided, and our global home on this planet is not to be irretrievably mutilated. It then listed the 5 things that have to be started immediately. Bring environmentally destructive activities under control and protect the integrity of Earth's systems that keep us alive and healthy. Manage crucial resources on which we depend far more effectively and carefully. Stabilize population. Reduce and eventually eliminate poverty. Ensure sexual equality and guarantee women control over their own reproductive decisions. This is a remarkable document. Scientists, as a rule, do not sign such strong statements, yet it was virtually ignored around the world. That's why 25 years later, in 2017, 17,000 scientists signed a Warning to Humanity 2 that indicated all but one of the problems first talked about in the first warning have worsened, and there are more that weren't anticipated back in 1992. In October 2018, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change issued a stern warning that if we do not restrict temperature from rising above 1.5 degrees C since the pre-industrial times by 2100, climate chaos will endure, and the foundations of civilization, our food system, and the economy will be catastrophically disrupted. To avoid that, the IPCC continues, we must reduce fossil fuel use by 45% by 2030 and 100% by 2050. Targets that demand reduction of at least 6% a year starting yesterday. One day after the IPCC report came out, marijuana became legal in Canada, and all references to the IPCC report disappeared. In May this year, the United Nations released a huge scientific study that indicates we are causing a catastrophic rate of extinction that threatens 1 million species of plants and animals at the present time. The next day, Harry and Meghan had a baby and pushed everything out of the media. WTF! It's not the media spreading fake news, it's all trivial news. Well, one person who takes scientists seriously is Greta Thunberg. Woo! And she has called out politicians who say they are taking action, all while emissions continue to rise. And so she has galvanized young people whose very lives are now at stake, and calls on parents and teachers and grandparents and everyone who loves their children to make their future the highest priority. It must be done, and this evening's program offers a way to meet the IPCC targets while ensuring the weakest, the poorest, the most vulnerable among us are cared for, and where jobs are created in an eco-centric world. Let's embrace it and make it happen.